Okay, let's talk about formal similarity and point-to-point correspondence with our verbal operants. So really with our verbal operants, what we want to think about, all it is it's a contingency that involves communication with another individual. And so like communication here might be a little bit of a soft word, but essentially what this means is that the reinforcement for this behavior comes from another individual. So it's not automatically produced by the environment. The consequences that maintain verbal operants are always some kind of attention. And what we call that attention is actually generalized conditioned social reinforcement. And it's really just a very cumbersome way to say attention. So a lot of our verbal operants have that as their primary reinforcer. So this is the primary reinforcer for all operants except one of them. So anybody know which operant that this does not apply to, where the reinforcer is not attention or this generalized conditioned social reinforcement? Nice. Yeah, Alyssa's got it. Killing it. So this is mand is the exception. And the mand is actually controlled by a particular consequence. So it's usually like the thing that's requested for. Okay, so with these two terms, formal similarity and point-to-point correspondence, so these terms are comparisons between the antecedent stimuli and the response that's being produced. And note that this is not like a difference in the reinforcer, because we know for all of our verbal operants that the reinforcer for them is attention, or this generalized condition social reinforcement. So what we need to look at is this comparison between the antecedent stimuli and the response itself. So focus on the comparisons between those two. So let's first talk about formal similarity. So this actually has, there's two definitions. I'll tell you which one is more right, and one that kind of like makes more sense. So formal similarity is that the antecedent and the response share the response form and are exactly the same. So for example, I say phone, you say phone. Those two things have formal similarity. And remember, it's kind of tricky here. We always want to focus on the person's perspective of whose behavior that we're analyzing. So my behavior, for analyzing my behavior, then your vocalizations are acting as stimuli for me, even though they're your behavior. And for analyzing your behavior, then everything that I produce is a vocal stimulus for you. So keep that in mind. It's always important to keep track of whose behavior that we're analyzing, and that way we can clearly see the antecedent that person's experiencing and their own response in that comparison. Okay, so this is actually the more correct definition, and it adds that part of like they are exactly the same as well. And it's kind of confusing because point-to-point correspondence kind of means a very similar thing. But the thing that's different between formal similarity and point-to-point correspondence is that they share the same response form. So, for example, if the form of the response is a vocal response as the response, and then the antecedent would also be a vocal antecedent that they're experiencing. Sorry, I'm getting a little lost in my clicker here. I would like to highlight this. And then the other definition is kind of just the same thing, but leaving out that end part. And this is the definition that a lot of people go with. It's so it usually, I'll say, it usually leads you to the right answer, but it's not fully accurate. So I put that in there because that's a common way that people think about it. Just know that this is the more accurate way to think about it. Cool. So when we have formal similarity, this applies to our duplicate category. And whenever you see duplic, this category, just kind of like finish the words like duplic equals duplicating the antecedent. And what that means is that it's the same response form and the same exact response. Who knows what are our 3 duplics? One of them you probably use pretty often, especially if you work in clinical settings. Anybody know here? Yeah, good. Karina's got a codic. Textual behavior is not quite a duplic. That's going to be a codic, actually. The other two, yeah, the motor imitation one. I'm actually blanking on the term right now myself. So this is when like copying like a sign or gesture. Exactly. So example, like if we were to sign something, dictation is actually another codic, not a duplic. But the last one here is copying text. So see in the echoic, like it's a vocal antecedent, vocal response. The motor imitation, motor antecedent, motor response, copying text, pretty straightforward where we have a written antecedent and a written response. Cool. So point-to-point correspondence, this is referring to the antecedent and the response. Share relevant features in the beginning, middle, and end. I'm going to say instead of sharing relevant features, but I'm going to say like represent the same thing. The same thing in the beginning, middle, and end. So this is where we're going to get into our transcription and then our textual behavior. So think about textual behavior as like reading, so written antecedent, and then a verbal response. And transcription, think about like transcribing at court or something, and that is going to be our vocal antecedent, and then it's going to be a written response. Good. Yeah, Alyssa's killing these. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And keep answering if you know the answers to these questions. Love to see it. So this is going to be, these two fall into our category of codic behaviors. Codic behaviors. And think about this as we're like decoding a stimulus. So let's look at an example. The beginning and the middle of the end all align in our vocal antecedents and the response. So if I'm reading something, then like look at these letters here. Like WRI is like ri. So those have like good correspondence between the letters and the sounds. TTEN is tin. So written. And all of those letters correlate to the sounds that produce in a meaningful way. So that's what we mean by point-to-point correspondence. Note that these are different response forms. So we have vocal antecedents, written response, and then the reverse with our textual behavior. So these do not have formal similarity, but they do have that point-to-point correspondence because they are representing the same thing. Hey there, Nick here. I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you did, make sure to like the video and subscribe so more people can see it. Also, if you're interested in any test prep services, check out my store down below at understandingbehavior.shop. Laters.